puking out everything you need to know about Webtoon format, file sizes, upload requirements, panel sizes, and best practices. Hey, Walter here, doing what I can to make comics easier, demystifying the process because it shouldn't be overwhelming or daunting to tell your story. I make videos about making comics. I also love answering your questions, so make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch the next videos and not miss out. Now, Webtoon can be a little bit confusing with all of its file requirements and all that new stuff. Webtoon is still a new format, but I have a little bit of experience under my belt with my featured original comic Hacksaw, so I thought I would share all the information I have, and hopefully that will help you out going forward. But first I want to start off with some definitions just to make sure we are on the same page. So a Webtoon comic or series is a single comic story, or it could be an anthology. When people say, I write so-and-so comic, this would be a Webtoon series. An episode is just your entire story broken into digestible and logical narrative chunks. An episode can contain 5 scenes or 1 scene or even half a scene. It's going to depend on what works for your story, your narrative. Like if a guy goes to a grocery store, buys stuff, and then goes home, that could be an episode. But if the guy goes to a grocery store and is about to pick up a cabbage and the episode ends, well, that's not a great place to end an episode, well, unless that cabbage is a killer cabbage and the reader knows that. But you get the general idea of what an episode is. Now, episodes are made up of files. A file is a single file on your computer. This is what you would upload to Webtoon. You can upload 1 or more files to a Webtoon episode. Now, files can contain 1 or more panels. Technically, a file could contain only a partial panel as well, but I'll talk about that later. A panel is a moment or an action that takes place in your story. It's usually encapsulated in a panel box, but it doesn't have to be, and especially with the Webtoon long scroll format, you might not have panel borders. So a moment could be a punch or someone jumping or a waiter asking 3 people what they would like to order for dinner. It's a snapshot of your story. Like if you paused a movie, that would be a panel. Now, panels can be any size. You can have multiple panels in a single file, or you could have a single panel that stretches across multiple files. So a Webtoon comic is called a series, and it contains episodes. Episodes contain files. Files contain panels. Webtoon has very specific file size restrictions. Files need to be 800 pixels wide by 1280 pixels tall, and they need to be JPEG files. Now, this is a file requirement, not a panel requirement. And then JPEG is just a standard universal image file. Any art program you're using should be able to save as a JPEG or export out to a JPEG. Quick warning here, do not save your work files as JPEG files. Work files are going to have all of your layers, your color layer, your lettering layer, your line art layer. As soon as you save as a JPEG, all of those layers get flattened and you no longer have access to all the layers. So don't save your work files as JPEGs. You're going to save your work files as whatever's native to the program you're using. So like a PSD file for Photoshop, or a CLI for Clip Studio, or CR, whatever it is for Krita. Don't save your work files as JPEG. The only time you save your files out to JPEG is when you're completely done and you're ready to upload that exported JPEG to Webtoon. Now, an 800 by 1280 file can't hold many panels. I'd say an average of maybe 2 panels per that file. Obviously, you could jam 100 panels in there if you wanted, but that would be really hard to read. So you will need several files for a single episode. Now, Webtoon will let you upload as many files as you need, as long as all the files are totally under 20 megs or less, and each file needs to be under 2 megs itself. This shouldn't be a problem, as most JPEG files range from 200 to 800 kilobytes, with an average on the lower end of 200 to 500. This gives us around 40 to 80 files, and if we have 2 panels in each file, this gives us around 80 to 60 panels. Now, there is a caveat. There's a problem here that you should know about, but don't freak out. The more variation you have in color, or the amount of lines or dots, will increase the file size a lot. So that 800 kilobyte file could quickly become 4 megs or even 20 megs for a single file. Examples on how to increase the file size pretty quickly would be a lot of gradients, or just an insane amount of lines or dots like adding screen tones. Push come to shove, we can use an online JPEG compressor to shrink the files even further with minimal loss in quality. Now only do this if you must, because there is a loss in quality, and although it is minimal, you will still notice it. But you can take a 20 meg file down to 4 megs or a 4 meg file down to, under 1 meg. The easiest solution is just have your episodes 100 panels or less. I would say 40 to 50, maybe 60 panels is ideal. Now if there's a Webtoon contest and there's an episode limit, this might be a little tricky and compression might be your only option. Or you can just do some good editing and shrink your story a little bit. Or you could also just make your panels smaller so you can fit more panels per file and therefore having less files to upload. Panel height sizes can and will vary depending on your content. Now they have to be 800 pixels wide or less, regardless, since that is the file size restriction, 800 pixels wide by 1280 pixels tall. My general rule of thumb for standard simple panels is I suggest keeping it around 500 pixels, maybe up to 700 pixels tall. This is the size that will let a desktop user see the entire panel on their screen. And then you can use really long, tall panels for moments that need a huge impact. But just remember, if you start going over 500 or start going over 1200 pixels, readers won't be able to see the image all at once. They will have to scroll through the image, and sometimes that can be really cool for reveals. Just realize if you're going over that, people aren't gonna be able to see that entire image. Font sizes will vary depending on the font, but a general rule of thumb is to keep your fonts around 30 to 60 pixels tall for a single file. The harder your font is to read, the larger the font's gonna need to be. Fonts need to be. You can test it by putting the file on your phone to see if you can read the text, or you could even zoom out on your computer to about the width of your phone and then see if you can read it. You can also just put your comic next to one of the original series on Webtoon and see how your font compares to their font. This is the format I'm currently using to draw my episodes. I take that infinite vertical scroll and I chop it up to create a more finite view for myself. So this particular file is 4000 by 4500, and you can see the entire episode all at once just to make sure everything is working together. Now once I have my comic completed in this format, I copy all of these columns into a single long vertical scroll column that is 800 pixels by like 30,000 pixels. It could be 40,000, 20,000. That's gonna vary depending on how long your particular episode is, how many panels you have. Once I have it in a single file, I save it, then I export it out as a JPEG. I take that over to the website Croppy, and that website's gonna split my long file into 800 by 1280 chunks, which is the size we need for Webtoon. Your other option would be just to create a file that's 800 by 1280, draw your panels in there, open up another 800 by 1280 file, draw your panels in there, keep repeating that until you were done with your entire episode, and just upload that to Webtoon without doing anything else. Now that's a perfectly fine and easy way to do it. The reason I don't do it that way and I use my template is just because I like to see the entire episode, see all of the panels working together to make sure that they support one another and that there's enough movement in that episode. Once you have all of your files, just highlight them all to see the total file size of all of them and just make sure it is under that 20 megs. If it isn't, you can further compress the files using an online compression site like compressedjpeg.com. Quick warning here, if you do this, you want to do it for all of the files in a single episode. I would even suggest doing this for all episodes in your comic series because you want to make sure that the loss of quality is consistent across the entire episode, across the entire comic, so that everything looks the same and things aren't changing. Readers are going to notice that. I have a video series where I go over the entire Webtoon making process from start to finish. Hit the button above if you want to check out that playlist. I go over all my techniques and all my thoughts, from writing to thumbnailing to drawing to coloring to layouts to lettering to uploading, pretty much the entire process, and hopefully that will help you make your Webtoon. And hopefully this video helped you understand all of the Webtoon file requirements If it didn't, or if you have more questions, let me know in the comments. Now, if you want to find a cool Discord to hang out in and share your artwork, ask questions, join in some art challenges, go to the Illustrati Discord. The link is down below. If you want to help support this channel and more videos, then check out my Patreon. If you want to be dope, fresh, awesome sauce, then just keep being the cool cat that you already are. And if you want to keep making comics easier, make sure to like, link, love, hug, and hit that sub button for more sweet, sweet goodness. Catch you in the next video. Peace.